Well, hello there, everyone. It's Christy, and I am very pleased tonight to be having a hangout with Kevin Logan. After the second debate, Kevin very kindly invited me on for a chat on his channel, and now I am hosting. And we're here to talk about the debate that happened last night and the race in general, and also, I think we discussed this before going on air, we're also going to talk about the impact America has on the world from the perspective of a non-American. That would be Kevin in this case. So, yeah, just to get started, I guess, for the rest of the show, for the people who are listening, I'm just going to have a chat with Kevin and you all get to listen in. So, yeah, I'm not really thinking about you. I'm just going to talk about whatever I find interesting. So in terms of the debate last night, did you watch the whole thing? And what were your impressions of what you did see?
I did, and it was amazing. It was genuine car crash stuff because I agreed with actually with Mark Cuban, who's the slightly eccentric billionaire who owns the Dallas Mavericks NBA franchise, who was there supporting Hillary Clinton. When he was walking in, it's someone, a reporter shoved a microphone in his face and said, "What does she have to do?" And he said, "She doesn't have to do anything. She could just go out there and stand in silence and just let him talk because he kills himself every time." But she did better than even just that. She set so many traps for him, and he fell into every last one. Because this is the thing, I've got no problem with someone from outside the political system coming in and trying to gain any office. If it's democratic and all the rest of it, I don't really care. But you've got to have some level of political craftsmanship to you, and he's got nothing. He's got one club in his bag, and that's double down, never apologise, and it doesn't work.
The thing that struck me about his debate performance, and I'll talk about hers, I'm sure, at some point, but it's stream of consciousness. It's sort of whatever shiny object pops up in his mind.
Yeah, he doesn't complete an entire sentence ever.
No, it's like he starts a sentence not knowing where it's going to end.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of feel like you're on a rickety kind of I don't know, a railroad track or something, and you're never quite sure if he's going to crash off, which direction he's going to turn. It's a roller coaster with him. And like I said, the diversions. He started talking about his comments about grabbing the pussy and all that, and instantly pivoted to emails. What? That's not what's being discussed. Are you? And I kept thinking to myself, is English your first language, Mr.
Right?
Trump? What the fuck is wrong with you? It's very peculiar.
There's a great documentary series by Ken Burns about baseball.
Yes.
Why it's America's game. And one of the tricks that they used to pull, there was a guy who was, I think he was a pitcher. I can't remember all of the specifics, but he had really severe ADD. They didn't call it at the time, but that's what it was. And he would get distracted by anything. He'd be in the middle of the game and they'd hear fire engine go by. And he would run off the field because he was a bit of a pyromaniac and he loved fires. And so people learned this about him. And they would just start bringing things with them, like puppies, and showing him.
Well, that is just not cricket, frankly.
To distract him, and shiny objects. And that's, it reminds me of Donald Trump, because in his head, whenever he just has a random thought that, as you point out, is unconnected entirely to the thing he's speaking about in the moment, he'll just follow that thought. And,
yeah,
oh God.
Well, I think part of it must be because he's been surrounded by sycophants and lackeys all of his life, that no one's gone, "Shut the fuck up, Donald. That's not, you're being an idiot," which is something you learn as a kid. If you start rambling like that, someone will tell you to shut up, and you sort of learn, social mores and how to actually interact properly on a normal level. Whereas I think people have indulged him far too much, and he doesn't have any semblance of like you say, it's stream of consciousness rather than it just being, this is the thought, this is the question I've got, this is the thought I have on it, that's the end, start, middle, and end of a sentence. It's just, oh, I'll just say some words and see where it goes. There's no structure to it at all.
Nor is there any content in there.
Yeah, that is true. Some of the like his big phrase is, "Oh, we're going to fix trade," and someone will push him on it. Yeah, we're going to fix trade. We're going to do deals. That's not a fucking policy.
Right.
That's nothing. That's a 6-year-old can come up with that. Tell me something. What are you going to do? Oh, we're going to fix trade. We're going to build a wall. We're going to fix trade. That's not.
what surprising person said exactly that same thing, sort of paraphrasing, to Stephen Colbert on late night television last week? Bill
Jesus of
O'Reilly.
Nazareth.
Bill
Oh, Bill
O'Reilly
O'Reilly. Lord.
said
Well, there you
that
go.
you should ask Donald how, not
Yeah.
what. How? I'm gonna, build a wall. How?
Well, that's
I'm
the thing. That, to all
gonna
of the Donald
go
Trump, I mean,
what wall.
I doubt this is going to attract a great deal of Donald Trump supporters, but to any of them that are listening, know this: A, he's not going to get elected, but even if he did, that wall is never going to happen. It's not possible to do it. Even, I mean, it's possible in theory to build a wall that long, obviously, but it's just all of the bureaucracy involved and the different states and the ecological problems and the fact that it's not actually going to affect anything, even if you did build the fucking thing. It's never going to happen.
Yes, he doesn't understand the details of his own policy. He doesn't understand how the Constitution works.
Well, he kept saying at one point, he said, "Oh, well, my plan's going to do X, Y, and Z over 10 years." You're only going to be president for 8 years at most. How long do you think your presidency is going to last? He doesn't seem to know even the most basic things.
He said something along the lines of, well, he did actually manage to actually repeat the name of a Supreme Court case.
Yes.
But he doesn't seem to really get, a lot of times when he talks, what he says, like Hillary should have done when she was senator was change the law. Well, she's like one person in the Senate. She can't
Yeah,
change.
there were 100 of them. She's not a fucking dictator of the Senate, you twat.
And a whole other house and also two other branches. So this idea
And
that,
even if she sent something to the Republican president at the time, he wouldn't have gotten through. He'd have vetoed it. So I mean, what do you expect her to do? It's like someone with their hands tied going, "Well, why don't you scratch your own face?" Because my hands are fucking tied. I can't do it.
right, but he doesn't seem to have the basic, the whole point of doing a debate prep. I think we can see what it is now, and it's that you cover the issues that you think will come up, so that you're familiar with them, so that you can speak to them coherently in a very short amount of time and make and communicate to people what your important points are. So when Hillary starts a response, she's reacting to the question, she's thinking about the way to connect it to a similar policy, because a lot of times the way the questions are phrased are not designed, that politicians don't answer the questions as phrased, right? We all know that.
Yeah.
But she's moving to something particular. She has facts and figures. She has sources that she's referring to in her head when she's talking about things. And she is constructing an answer to fill the time. Whereas Trump just opens his mouth. And it's just, I think I've said this before, it's like Peter Griffith and Brian, when Brian asked Peter, "Do you even listen to yourself when you speak?" And Peter said, "I fade in and out."
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, I will give him. Well, I will give him one credit point for having done some preparation this time and then immediately revoke it, and many others, because he didn't do any the first two fucking times. It's an insult to the American public, and to the democratic process in general. But he did do some preparation, it seems, with the intellectual heavyweight known as Chris Christie. Brilliant. I mean, those two in a room, that conversation must have been fucking stellar. But apparently they did do some debate prep, and you could see that to a degree at the beginning. For the first about 15, 20 minutes, I was thinking to myself, okay, there's no real substance and his sentences aren't really structured very well. But by Donald Trump standards, this is actually a relatively competent performance. This is okay. This isn't a fucking car crash. But you knew, and Hillary Clinton being the the supreme political operator that she's clearly, well, she's occasionally slipped out of because she hasn't really needed to. She's gotten, I think, possibly a little rusty fighting against this man because she hasn't had to do anything to provoke him. It's amazing. But the first real big sort of bear trap she set for him was on calling him Putin's puppet, which not only is true, but is a good line. And instantly, you could see the privilege. This person speaking down to me. What the fuck? And he instantly started interrupting her with, "No, you're the puppet. You're the puppet." And you knew he was gone at that point. You knew she'd won. She could have just literally dropped the mic and walked off stage because she'd fucking won.
I would have loved that.
Because after that, he just started interrupting and shouting and arguing with the fucking... Even the bloke who works for fucking Fox who was moderating, he started arguing with him. Although, to be fair to Chris Matthews, or whatever his fucking name is.
Chris Wallace.
Chris Wallace. Yeah, he actually did a relatively good job, I have to say. I think I was not expecting a fucking Fox anchor to take the Republican nominee to task on untruths that he told, which he did later on. But Trump, once you'd said that, the thin-skinned childishness of the man came erupting forth again, and that's all she had to do. She literally could have just stood in silence then, because you knew if you give him enough rope, he will hang himself every time because he's not a statesman. He's got no sense of. He's never had to in his life had to sell himself as a decent human being to others because he's always had the financial power to basically say fuck you to the world. But when you're asking for tens of millions of votes, that don't fly anymore. You have to pretend, at least pretend to be a nice person. And he just fundamentally isn't.
The other thing is, I think today it kind of twigged with me finally, the because it's hard for me to understand the conservative mindset. It's very difficult for me to understand that worldview. It's like trying to understand being a believer again after being an atheist. I mean, I can conceptualize it, but I can't be there in that moment. But
It's like with the thing about even if an alligator could talk to us, we couldn't really understand it.
yeah, it's just such a different experience and worldview.
Yeah.
The whole point of conserving is the idea that things are fine right now. Actually, we could even go back a little bit because things were better when I was a kid. And preserving that almost, I think, idyllic notion of what you thought your country was when you were a kid. And that's not obviously the whole thing of conservatism, but the whole principle is to retain things and to not make progress, but to resist progress and to do progress very slowly, if at all. Whereas as a progressive, I think if something is crap, we should fix it. We should change it. We should try something different. But with Trump, he's leading the conservative party. And traditionally, throughout its history, it's been the conservative party. It's been the party of the right. And he has no interest in preserving anything, not even the integrity of our democratic process when it comes to the norms of our elections. He is more revolutionary than anybody on the left, even Bernie Sanders, in terms of upending our practices and the way that we have always done things to on a whim. And I could kind of get today when I sort of see Bill Kristol and Steve Schmidt is a great. I really like Steve Schmidt quite a lot for being a Republican, and the way that he is such an aberration and an anathema to what their party at its core stands for, to me really stood out today.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. He's, as you say, they're traditionally the Conservative Party, but he isn't a Conservative. He's an alt-right, or at least is pretending to be an alt-right person because that's what's got him to this point so far. And like I say, he doesn't have any other gear. All he has is what Donald Trump has always been in this race. But yeah, when you alluded to it there, the fact that even given the opportunity, I mean, Wallace handed him on a plate, just said, look, and I could almost see Wallace pleading with him to give the answer that I think everyone around the world was hoping he would give to the question of, will you accept the result of the election? To which, I mean, not only did he not say, yeah, I will accept it, he even then started to make a bit of a fun of it, as if the democratic process is something that you can just undermine willy-nilly. Who gives a fuck? It's just the bedrock of the republic, after all, the peaceful transition of power and all of that. By saying, oh, I'll keep you in suspense. Oh, fuck off.
Yeah.
You irresponsible prick. You are stoking fires underneath very dangerous people.
This is not a reality show. This is not where Donald Trump is going to come out after he loses and stand up in front of the stage, and then the cameras are going to pause for that stupid, pointless, stretched out anticipation 10 seconds before they give their answer, and then pronounce whether or not he will accept the results of the election. This isn't, and Garrett pointed out, and at my hangout with him, that the United States was, at its time, a revolutionary idea. It was a secular republic. And we have successfully, even when leading up to the Civil War, had elections. Now, of course, the South didn't like the result of the 1960 election and that they broke away. But it's not like Lincoln's presidency itself was undermined and called illegitimate. It wasn't like they were raising up an alternative president and starting, they had a different election. So what Trump is doing, I just don't, it goes beyond the pale.
We don't even have to go back that far. I think you've got Al Gore in 2000, who I think had legitimate cause to call shenanigans potentially, given the repeated nonsense in Florida. But for the good of the nation, eventually he sort of realised it wasn't going to work for him, and he gave up because it's the best thing for the country. So you get on with it and you just accept the result. And whereas
And
Trump now, Trump, he's making it up because he's saying that there's been voter fraud at at polling booths that won't be set up for at least another fortnight. So what? How can there possibly have been any voter fraud at things that don't exist yet? You're
yeah,
making it up, and this is the thing. It's I don't think he's intentionally trying to undermine that cornerstone, that bedrock of the American Republic, because he necessarily wants to do that. I think he's doing it as a byproduct of having to, because he's such a ludicrously fragile, pathetically crippled ego he has on him. He has to set up that false narrative so he can pretend he didn't lose fair and square because the American people looked at him and went, no, no fucking way, which is basically what's going to happen given the numbers the way they are. He's got that fallback for his the emotional rebound of, oh, well, it was stolen from me. But the thing is, that then undermines the whole democratic process. And as I say, it's ridiculously irresponsible even beyond that, because there are a lot of people at his rallies who have spoken about violent uprising and things, which he could have calmed all of that down just by coming out and doing the decent, humane, grown-up thing for once in his fucking life and just say, yeah, I'll accept the result, which every single other fucking candidate has always said they would. But no, Donald Trump's a special person, apparently.
two things. One, you mentioned the alt-right, and I want to talk about that in the future, because like what might happen after this election and the role of the alt-right in that is something that I'd want to chat with you about. But bringing it back to the current topic, the Al Gore situation was also after the state of Florida was initially called for Gore that night in 2000. I remember because he also won, I think, Pennsylvania, and he might have also won Ohio or something, but I remember at some point going, that was it.
No, he didn't win Ohio. No.
Okay. Thank you for the correction. But anyway, I remember them calling Florida, and then they moved on, and then they took Florida back. And I went, what do you mean you take it back? You can't take it back. You've called it based on the data, and so that was a particular situation after the election happened, and it was also a recount of the ballots. So this wasn't Al Gore saying that he didn't trust the results of the election before it took place. He was looking at a particular state with a very, very narrow margin, and the butterfly ballot, which created all the problems with people in a county that had never voted for Pat Buchanan before to vote for Pat Buchanan in large numbers. So you're right, Gore did have justification for his concerns, let's call them that, but he didn't do that before the election. And there's a big difference between asking for a recount, which politicians are by state law sometimes able to do within a certain percentage of the total, how close it is. But this is calling an election rigged, and that is unprecedented. And I heard Joe Scarborough this morning trying to say, oh, let's look at the words he used. But you can't take the words he used out of the context, which you mentioned, that he's been setting this up for weeks.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And it's, I only mentioned Al Gore just to give that stark modern contrast, because, he was perfectly legitimate to do what he did. And he didn't then, as I suspect Trump will, spend the next 4 or indeed 8 years undermining the presidency of the person he lost to. If he accepted it, he moved on with his fucking life. I doubt Trump's going to do that.
Yes, one would think that on November 9th, you're like, finally, he's gone, but I don't think he will be.
No, but we do have the hope to cling to that he's in his 70s now. I mean, he can't be around for much longer, surely. Not as like a viable political force. I mean, he might be alive, but I mean,
Yeah, remember when people said John McCain was old in 2008 and that he might not survive, and yet he's still around? So
true, but had he won, the obviously huge amount of stress that puts on a human body, that's bound to be,
That's true.
But even so, I mean, to be fair to the man, he's been through some physical tribulations in his life. He's in incredibly good state for his age. It's amazing.
Yes.
And not just that, but I mean, of all the things that that Clinton said and did in the debate, which was very good, she pointed out many of the lies and stuff. But there was a long sort of monologue she went through of the different things he's done to disgrace America and himself and many other people, including John McCain. Which I don't know how people who call themselves patriots can possibly support a man who says, "Oh, I prefer people who don't get caught." The man was tortured serving his nation. What kind of inhuman prick would you have to be to mock a person for that?
I really I wonder if the Republicans who are stumping for Trump, not that he's going to win, but people like Paul Ryan and previously John McCain, were a little bit of like, if he won the presidency, if Trump actually won, like the dog that actually caught the car, I don't know how Paul Ryan could work with Donald Trump, given the fact that he's been abusing him on Twitter and, throwing shade, I think is the phrase,
Hello?
and slagging him off, basically. And John McCain the same. I mean, how could he work with anybody in the House or Senate? Because he would be live tweeting insults when things didn't go their way the whole time. It would be chaos.
Well, it already is. There's basically a civil war going on within the Republican Party, and it's going to cost them not just the presidency, but it could well cost them the Senate as well. It looks like now, because
I do want to
well,
get onto that, but I wanted to get more of your take on
oh,
Hillary. But if you want to finish up that thought, then.
oh yeah, no, I was just going to say it's costing the down ticket candidates, as it were, in for the Senate and the House. It's going to cost them a lot as well, and it might indeed end up costing Paul Ryan.
Yep,
It should be,
speakership.
which I couldn't blame either people, and it's sort of had it coming. You can't serve two masters in that way. You're either for him or you're not.
Yeah, we can
You
talk
either
about
you've either got a
serving.
backbone or you haven't.
In terms of serving two masters, we could talk about all the evangelicals who have Gary Bauer and Billy Graham Jr., the guy who runs Liberty University, and all of these evangelicals who suddenly decided that moral character is not important anymore. But we're getting off the topic. So Hillary's performance. I wanted to get your take. You said briefly that you thought she did a good job.
I think she did a very good job. Again, I mean, I started with that Mark Cuban quote because I think it's right. And also the fact that people, even though she won and won comfortably, even Sargon of Akkad, who was live tweeting like basically jerking fucking Trump off all night, said that he lost. So I mean, I think that's pretty conclusive. But the people were saying, "Oh, it's not a knockout punch." Trump is not a candidate you can knock out because, as he said, one of the very few salient and partially true things he said during this whole campaign was at the very start when he said you could go down Fifth Avenue, shoot someone, and it wouldn't cost him votes. And whilst it would, in reality, that would cost him some votes. That kind of 30% or whatever, that hardcore support he has, wouldn't go away from him ever. So you can't have a knockout punch. I mean, they don't mind that he's boasted about sexually assaulting women and indeed has sexually assaulted women. They don't give a fuck. So you can't knock him out in that sense at all. All she could do was show the undecideds what a brutal piece of shit he is. And she did it very well. She laid several traps for him. He fell into it. She had one or two really nice zingers, which was missing from the second performance. I think she was a bit flat in that regard, but she had some nice bits of patter and got a few laughs from an audience that was specifically told not to make any noise. So to get a laugh out of an audience like that is pretty good going. And she got him a couple of times with stuff. And like I say, she laid traps for him and he fell into every one. It was perfect. She couldn't have asked it to go much better, really.
Agreed. The person best situated to throw the knockout punch is Donald Trump himself.
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, that 35%, whatever, of hardcore Trump people or hardcore Republicans. And I think that is a distinction worth making out of fairness. I think there are some people who don't follow politics particularly, but are from traditionally Republican households who don't know or really give a fuck about politics, but are going to vote for him anyway. They're not necessarily the alt-right scumbags or whatever. So I think there are some Trump people who aren't necessarily evil, but whatever. The hardcore support that we're going to vote for him are anyway, and that's the really bizarre thing about Trump's performance. In certainly the second and third debate, the first one was just a car crash. The second and third, you think, well, he's got to react to that surely, and he doesn't seem to be trying to win any new votes, even though he knows he has to. He must know he has to. The numbers are very, very stark right now.
He's very good with numbers. He's the best.
He's oh God, what kind of an answer? And that's the thing. That's what shows the lack of intellectual power that he has behind him. When Hillary Clinton came out with the long list of things he's done, spoken to about women in certain ways, and played that card very nicely. And again, all Trump had to come back with was, "No one has more respect for women than me." That's not convincing anyone, mate. Not even your fucking supporters are going to go, "Oh well, that's well answered." That's nothing. That's nothing. He might as well. I tweeted out a silly one about it'd have made more sense if he just smeared himself in shit and started shouting at the audience. It's just as fucking worthwhile, frankly.
Kind of what he did.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Intellectually, that's precisely what he did. Yeah. He's oh god, it's shameful, and we were going to get onto America in general. It's shameful for America that this man has gotten as far as he has.
Yeah, so this seems like a good segue. Hillary, fine. That was a good. We'll move on from that, guys. I guess you can't really say other than like you do a good job. We could, you've gone into it, so I'm happy to move on. But yeah, well, two things. One, we could talk about your perception of America. The other thing we could talk about is how the Republican Party got this way and where it might be heading in the future, because I have a bit of a take on that. I want to test out. I'm giving a talk next week and decided today that in that talk I'm going to explain why Hillary Clinton won the election on November 8th on the 26th of October. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. But well, I mean, that is tempting fate, isn't it?
Well, I do have a disclaimer that's saying barring any incapacitation of the candidate, she will be our next president. I mean, there's actually, I don't know, I was watching Rachel Maddow. She reported out, I think the other night, 2 nights ago now, that there's a betting firm out of Ireland, and in 2012, 2 days before the election, they decided to pay out anybody who had bet that Barack Obama would win the election. So they were so confident in the polling predictions that they actually started paying it out 2 days before the election was held. This time around, they paid it out on the 19th of October.
Ooh.
Or 18th of October. They've paid it out already. That Hillary Clinton will be the next president.
Yeah, I think he's out beyond 4-1 with most firms, which is, I mean, I know America doesn't do fractional odds, but that's massive. In a 2-horse race, that's fucking enormous. Yeah, that's the kind of price you would expect in like a 6-horse, 7-horse race or something ridiculous. Anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah, I was looking at some of the polls, and the University of Virginia's poll of polls on the Electoral College has Hillary at the highest she's been in 2016 with 352. And for those who don't know, she only needs 270, so she's got 82 more than she needs as it stands, which is ridiculous. That's a huge margin.
One of the tracking polls that keeps track of states by solid Republican, lean Republican, flip, lean Democrat, lean strong Democrat, moved Texas from Republican stronghold to lean Republican because Hillary is within 2 to 4 points in recent Texas polls.
Wow, that's amazing. So he could end up losing Arizona, Utah to an independent, and Texas. That's amazing.
Yeah. Steve Schmidt, when Morning Joe Scarborough asked him, where would you put it right now? And he said northwards of 400 delegates.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, Alaska has moved, I think, to lean Republican, or there's some close polls there as well. It's just...
Alaska? What the fuck? This is madness now. I mean, you might... I mean, that is silly. I don't even know. For those who don't follow those things, and why would you? Geeks like me and Christy do. Alaska's just one of the most solid red ever. I mean, Georgia. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it produced fucking Sarah Palin, for Christ's sake. You know what I mean? Like, it's that crazy red, and the fact that that's close is embarrassing, frankly.
And the thing is that what's great for me as a Democrat is that this is happening not like, this meltdown came not 2 days before the election, but a couple weeks before it, which means all of the Republicans have time to panic. And the problem that the party's facing, so the sort of the spiel I'm going to give is, being in Europe, you and I both know that since the financial crisis, we have seen an increase in right-wing parties and right-wing activism across Europe. And
when we say right wing, we don't just mean like soft right. We're talking about real nasty out there bastards. Yeah,
Pegida, and you've got groups in the UK. I think a lot of that sort of right-leaning attitude is what drove Brexit in terms of anti-immigrant and all of the things that we know about in terms of European politics.
Yeah, and surprise, surprise, that one of the leaders of that movement, Nigel Farage, has been advising Donald Trump.
So we've seen in places where you have multi-party systems, the rise of or the expansion of right-wing parties, and we've been watching this for several years now in Europe. The same pressures are happening in the United States, but they're compressed because there's only a two-party system. This is my thesis. It's not just my thesis, but it's a way to describe it, and also map onto the same kind of patterns of attitudes and rightwards shifting that we see in Europe as well. So the U.S. and Europe are kind of doing the same things, but it's a natural political science experiment because we have different political systems. So one thing we can do is compare how it works in multi-party systems or PR systems versus a two-party system. And with 2010, the election of Ted Cruz and the rise of the Tea Party, we saw the growth of that and the expansion of it. But by the time we've gotten now to the 2015 part of the cycle, what we're seeing as part of the Tea Party core, but not associated with it, is this alt-right movement within the Republican Party. And at the moment, we have the head of the alt-right movement and all of the establishment Republicans who are kind of outside and have no impact on what happens in the party. And then you have the base, and you have the moderate base, and you have the extreme base. I think that this eventually is going to break the party in two, because the alt-right side of the Republican Party is incommensurably stands against the establishment principles. So I don't see how they can reconcile themselves. So with Trump going forward, if he does decide to do some sort of online media product like a Blaze, like Glenn Beck did or something, then he's going to retain that, let's call it 30% of the Republican Party. And evangelicals might not go that way, and the establishment might not go that way. But given that the Republican Party itself is facing demographic destruction by, say, 2030, the idea of splitting the white vote even more because of the two wings of the party that are incommensurable, I think really sets it up for basically the kind of modernization that David Cameron did back in 2009, I think it was, trying to set up a party for 2010. The Republican Party in the United States is still stuck in the kind of Southern strategy with dog whistles and appealing to rural whites. That's just not going to take it forward.
Well, but you could see that even with Trump last night with his bad hombres and just absurd nonsense. But one point I would add to yours, or to possibly take slight odds with what you'd said there, I think they were already at the point of demographic destruction, because not only, like you say, are there potentially going to be a split, which I think there probably will be at some point down the line, but even if the quote unquote moderate part of the Republican Party cannot stay where it is, even if they do split off, they would still have to move in a modern direction from where they are now, let alone being anchored by that much more extreme side of it, which is so far from the reality of the lives of most Americans and the beliefs of most Americans that Donald Trump might lose Alaska, for fuck's sake. I mean, it's so ridiculous.
It is kind of hard to imagine an establishment Republican Party that has legitimate outreach to the African American community, or has policies that will alienate Hispanic Americans.
Yeah, well, that's actually a very good point that was made. I was watching a British news show today, and they were comparing. American guy was on there comparing Brexit with the current election in America, and the one really big difference is in Britain, ethnic minorities make up about 9% of the electorate. Whereas in America, it's about a third, isn't it? Something like 30%, with black people and Hispanics and Asian Americans and Native Americans and things. So, and Hillary Clinton's winning about 85 to 90% of that demographic, which means if you're just going to go with white folks, you then need to win a massive majority, which is just unrealistic, given the already built-in college electoral votes from places like California and New York that the Democrats already have. You're just not going to be able to win that kind of majority of white folks to turn that around. So I think they're already at the point, even if no more Latin American Latino people enter the United States, which isn't, I mean, that's not realistic. That's going to continue to happen. They're basically already at that tipping point where they're either going to be swept aside, people forget that the Whigs were a massive party once, and where they're nothing, it's not impossible that a major party can fall away in that way. I
Very
mean,
true.
you would think just because those Republican voters are still there, that a party of some variety would fill that void, whether it's a splinter group from the Republicans or a new populist right wing party or whatever. Someone would have to fill that void. Just the basic market demographics suggest that that's the case. But any split within the Republican Party or new right wing party is going to have to establish itself against a very well oiled and popular in well, in places with large electoral college votes, machine in the DNC. So I mean, I don't see that other than a radical change toward the centre ground, the Republican Party can ever win a general election again.
At the president's level, that is a very tall tale, or tall task, I should say, not tale. But yeah, it's looking every year it gets less and less likely for them, as long as they remain their sort of rigid, fixed position. And we have the phrase, you'll hear it if you listen to political discussions sometimes on television, about political realignments or political de-alignment. But there is a case to be made that there are massive realignments. If you think of it like a fault line and an earthquake that happens and there's a shift, right? But instead, what you have is the American population, and it's changing, it's dynamic, and you have people kind of moving around, and parties are sort of fixed objects, and they try to capture as much of those populations while retaining their structure as possible. And what's happening right now with all these changes, you're right, the Republican Party is sort of like built a wall between along its own party. So there's two rooms now, and there's a smaller piece of the pie to be going for, and they're kind of having to either shrink or crack the structure apart and redefine who they really are in order to be able to get more of those voters into their structure.
And
So
it's not just the fact. I mean, even the low browness of the modern Republican Party is starting to show through, even with white folks now, because it looks like this might be the first election since such numbers were started to be gathered after the Second World War, that the Republican Party is going to lose college educated white folks.
because people with a college degree, they just find him so painful to listen to.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. That kind of lowbrow gutter nonsense is not going to play with people with any level of education, and it's a shame it's playing with people with that lower level of education as well, because he's basically taking advantage of that. I mean, he said it, didn't he? At one of the first primaries, I love winning. Was it? I love the uneducated or whatever.
Yeah, the low, there's like high education, not the low educated or something, but yeah.
Yeah, just oh fucking hell! I mean, he's not even hiding it from you. He's not even pretending. He's just saying, "I love." Well, again, as he said with "I love winning with women," he didn't say "I love women." He said "I love winning with women." All he sees is that, as he's been handed everything. And actually, I mean, this is a slightly weird tangent to go off, and I've gone almost Trumpian now. I've seen my mind has gone onto this other thing.
Shiny object.
Yeah, the shiny object being that I love the idea that a man who's been given everything in life, given every possible opportunity, is now moaning that the system is against him. Are you fucking mad? You've been given everything. A man of your level of intellect, if you were a poor man, you'd be the fucking mad prick on the bus that everyone doesn't want to sit next to. Whereas because you were rich, you've gotten to this stage. The system is not against you. The system has given you everything.
Oh, and to listen to him whine when he's, and especially, of course, coming from a man representing a party that tells anyone who objects to the way they're treated or says their experience is demeaning, calls them whiners, right?
Yeah.
And then you have Trump, who is clearly getting his ass handed to him, blaming everybody except himself, his own party leadership, the president, the candidate he's running against, the media, the polls, everything. It's all rigged. And as Trevor Noah pointed out, it's like the media isn't rigged, Donald Trump. They just record what you say and then play it back to you.
Yeah. And not just that, but
That's
he
it.
didn't seem to mind when the media were fawning over him for 12 months during the primaries and all that. He was loving the media then, but now all of a sudden they've started doing their jobs properly. It's rigged against him. No, like you say, with those tapes, that's not a conspiracy against you. That's playing back some shit you actually said. That's not a conspiracy, Donald. That's the truth.
again quoting Steve Schmidt, because he says so many things that I think are very insightful. He said that I was going to make another point and I forgot what it was going to be, but the skipping Steve, if I remember, I'll come back to it. But Trump. Oh, and now I remember. Sorry, it's like I'll cut this bit out if I edit it. But Steve Schmidt was saying we've got two very unpopular candidates in this election, and whoever gets more media time is reminding voters how little they really like them.
Yeah.
And the fundamental problem with Donald Trump is that he makes the election about himself. He has made this campaign about him. He has gone out there to dominate every single news cycle, which means that he's actually stepping over the toes of their WikiLeaks releases and everything else that happens that day. And the more that he does this, the more his numbers go down. So the one thing
So
that he can do is just shut up. And he is entirely incapable of doing that.
Yeah. So I mean, taking that to its logical conclusion, Hillary Clinton should just go on holiday for a fortnight.
Oh yeah, she should.
Just go on holiday. Just let him do his thing. Come back. You'll be president. It'd be amazing. Well, president elect. You would be amazing. You know.
She really just has to stay out of the headlines, and she doesn't even have to try to do that, because Donald Trump is out there every day saying something so ridiculous that it's the fire engine going by, and all the media follow it right off of the field, and she's like, "Bye, see y'all
Well,
later."
not just that, but that then allows her to do those kind of smaller get out the vote type things that you don't necessarily want your main candidate to have to do. But seems how look at that. I mean, in theory, she could just take a fortnight off and come back, and she's won. Well, a bit more than that, nearly 3 weeks. So she can go and do that, and you can go and have a much more have her do slightly smaller events in key states and really pound those areas. Shaking hands and doing all that fucking shtick.
Like Ohio, Florida, all the swing states where there are Senate races on the ballot, and she wants a Democratic Senate.
Exactly. She can focus on getting those key battles for the Senate and indeed Congress, I suppose. And then trying to flip those houses, because if she gets in and there's that same level of obstructionism, it's going to be a nightmare. But what was John McCain on about? He's going to block anyone they mention. How's that going to work? That's not going to fucking hold for 4 years, you moron.
Exactly. Yes.
Anyway.
Well, I mean,
these are the people that say you've got to respect the Constitution, apparently. What?
Yes.
You don't seem to.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, how about we get rid of that Second Amendment? If we're just going to pluck out bits we don't like, we'll get rid of the Second Amendment then, shall we?
I'm as tired of hearing the phrase "they're gonna fill in the blank is gonna take your guns" as I am of hearing Jesus is coming back.
Yeah,
exactly. I've been hearing it my whole life. It's never happened.
Yeah, Barack Obama's had 8 years. He's not instituted Sharia law. He's not turned America into a Muslim caliphate. He's not taken the guns. He's not revoked the Second Amendment. He hasn't imprisoned fucking political opponents. Do you know what I mean? But we were ensured that was definitely going to happen. Fucking hell.
The NRA only has one level, and it's at 11. It's always screeching. It's always hysterical.
Well, Trump summed up that whole kind of fear-mongering attitude with that stuff about ripping the baby out of the womb.
Yeah, it's called a C-section.
Yeah, well, yeah.
As someone pointed out.
Yeah, beyond that, it's this thing that's been around for so long. It's the same tactic every time, and the stupid people fall for it, which is a damn shame, but they do. Because that doesn't happen to anyone listening. That doesn't happen. What Donald Trump was talking there was a lie.
What I was sort of disappointed in Hillary's answer to that question was she failed to point out that the late-term abortion, it was making a medical procedure illegal. The state was coming in, and before even knowing who the patients would be, for the rest of for into the future, denying doctors the opportunity to use a perfectly legitimate medical procedure, and that specific thing is done in very limited circumstances, usually where the health of either the health of the mother is the reason that having the baby will kill her, or the baby has they found through doing an the fluid test at 20 weeks.
Amniotic
fluid. Thank you. I've never been pregnant, so I don't know all this terminology. But,
well, I just like to point out that the person without the womb I had to correct someone there. That's fine.
And that this, it's not up to the government to decide the best way, even if, let's say, the fetus died in the womb, that procedure still could not be used to extract it because the procedure itself was illegal. It had nothing to do with the medical circumstances. And talk about an overreach of government.
Yeah.
That to me is, I can't think of a comparable situation where medical procedures are regulated by the state like that.
Yeah. The one mitigating factor I will allow for Clinton to play devil's advocate, because like I said, I think that would have been a perfectly righteous point to make. But from her perspective, she doesn't want to start making this election about abortion. Why would she? It's going down the right path as far as she's concerned. She doesn't want any new factor involved. So rather than give maybe what might be a slightly more controversial answer, which might then spark a debate about abortion, which she doesn't want, because all of the people that are very pro-abortion are probably with her anyway, or certainly not going to vote for Donald Trump, whereas the people who might be swayed by an abortion debate might go Donald Trump's way on the basis that he's pro-life, and they're leaning towards pro-lifeism. So just keep it quiet.
Yeah, but I don't disagree with any of that. But because it's always framed like especially with the late-term abortion bills, it's always framed in terms of like the woman's choice. But there is very little discussion about the doctor's autonomy and the doctor's ability to make to conduct the best procedure in the health of his or her patient.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we expect them to live by the Hippocratic Oath and then tie their hands when it comes to this particular piece of medical procedure. Yeah, it's nonsense.
And since we're on the topic of abortion, the other thing that really ticks me off, I didn't realize it until Donald Trump said that he thought women who tried to obtain abortions after they were made illegal should be punished for trying to obtain an abortion illegally. And then everyone went, oh, no, we don't go after the women. And I didn't really realize how patriarchal and paternalistic that view is. What it's saying is, what if we had a law that said we're going to make it illegal to sell drugs, but not illegal to buy drugs? Because people who are buying the drugs aren't committing a crime. Only the people who are providing the drugs. No, that makes no sense. So why would they carve out a special exemption for women who are seeking an illegal procedure? Because they don't actually want women to think, oh, that could be me.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think
it's the ultimate white knighting.
Yeah, and an allied point to that about they don't want women to think as to put themselves in that scenario was one very clever thing that Hillary Clinton did do during the debate. One very which I think would have really resonated with women was, and I should know being a woman, obviously, but one thing I think will have resonated was when she said that Donald Trump talks about women in this way and disparages them because of their looks or whatever. And I think every woman out there knows what that feels like. Boom. I mean, it's not going to make any headlines, but I think a lot of people watching that, every woman that watched that will have gone, yeah. And once you can put yourself in that person's shoes, that breaks down some of the coldness that people feel about her. She's not, she doesn't relate or whatever. You've made people relate to the situation you're describing. And so you've instantly warmed to that person in a way that you might not have otherwise. And I think that was a very clever one. And actually, I'm going to, again, I've gone Donald Trump. I've gone completely off on my own little to my own shiny object. I'm going to put out a Vine in a bit, because one thing that didn't make any headlines, but I think was a really nice Freudian slip from Trump. I don't know if you spotted it as well, was when he's describing the Trojan horse, the Syrian refugees that are coming in that he thinks are going to be terrorists for some reason.
Right, the women and children who are coming in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, terror to a man, obviously. He said, "Good luck." What was it? No, you'll see what happens over the next few years. Good luck with that, Hillary. He's basically given up. He basically conceded that he knows he's going to lose.
Yeah, very possibly.
I thought it was a nice Freudian slip. Yeah. He knows, which I thought was quite revealing as to his mindset. And he did, to be fair, he did look like a broken man toward the end. He looked like a tired old man.
And he was the one going on about her needing a rest, while he was, barnstorming across from rally of people who agreed with him to another rally of people who agreed with him, and yet he was the one who showed low energy.
Yeah, and I don't mind that particularly, because for a start, 90 minutes is quite. I mean, that would be taxing on a young person. to stand there under that kind of pressure for 90 minutes. So, but when you're in your late 60s or early 70s, whatever, they're both, neither of
Yeah,
them are
they're getting
spring
on.
chickens.
Mhm.
You're stood up for 90 minutes for a start. That's going to be taxing, and you're under incredible pressure, like the most pressure you've ever felt in your life, basically. That's going to be tiring. That's fine. But if you're going to run on, I'm the physically strong one, and then you stand there
Yeah.
looking like you're about to fucking keel over, yeah, it doesn't really work anymore, mate.
A lot of bluster. Basically, what he does is he tries to sell you something so you sign on the dotted line, and then after you signed, it's too late.
Yeah. Well, people should know from a brief examination of the Trump University nonsense and various of his building plans and stuff that, like you say, once they've signed on the dotted line, everyone he's ever dealt with gets shit on by him. And the American people, if they ever did sign on the dotted line, which thankfully they won't, would get the same, I'm sure.
Bringing it back to the comment that Hillary made that you mentioned about every woman knowing what that felt like. One thing that I've learned now, having gone through the first Black president and now the first woman standing for office, is that progress is really painful. I mean, not like on a not like a physical way, but one of the things that's actually been cathartic, I think, at least for me a bit, is to have these discussions about the way that individual men will treat a whole lot of women, and that what our experience is, and women coming forward to express what it's like. I actually had this conversation with my dad over the weekend because I had a similar experience, well, a couple times, but the most, like, the one that happened in the most recently was visiting with someone, we're visiting with a friend, a mutual acquaintance, guy that I knew. And we all, three of us went out, had a nice night, and I was staying in a hotel. So the three of us went back to his place because I'd left my case there. And he offered to take me downstairs and hail me a taxi to get to my hotel. And so I took him up on that, but he'd been drinking a lot. And when we got in the elevator, he basically just sort of cornered me and stuck his tongue down my throat. And it's shocking when that happens because you think, I know this guy, he's a friend, we have mutual friends. So, pushed him away. But that kind of stuff, it's not like, just because people don't talk about it because it's uncomfortable and it's embarrassing. And if you try to bring it up with a mutual friend, now you're asking them to take sides. But this thing happened to you, and especially with, if he's going to be around other women should know about this. There's a whole lot of stuff that leads on from that one incident in her life. I don't know that he even sort of really remembers it because he had been drinking. So he probably walked away unaffected, or if he did, maybe he thought he tried and struck out. But I don't, when he comes to town to visit our group of friends, I either don't go or I stay on the other side of the room. And that's not something I probably would have told my dad or people on YouTube had this conversation not happened. And I think if people start talking about their experiences, it might be a lot of consciousness raising and understanding how widespread this is and how many times a woman in her lifetime might have to deal with this. And not all, I didn't go running to the police for all the reasons I just said. He was a friend, I knew him, I got away, I was safe, but it doesn't mean that didn't have an effect on me. And it doesn't mean that, maybe it was hard about confrontation, but I really hope that it was just because he was drinking and he misread some signs that he thought he could just aggressively barrel in. I hope that's not a pattern with him. So yeah, this is, but it's incredibly painful to talk about, and it's painful to hear about. And for people who might excuse that behavior or not take it seriously, it might be hard for them to admit the damage that it actually does to, you emotionally and your friendships and your relationships. These are things that, if we're going to make progress, then I guess we have to kind of go through therapy together and talk about.
Yeah, I think that's probably true because I mean, a thing that affected me actually was, if you remember, the after the Isla Vista shootings, the hashtag yes all women, which then sparked the not all men, fucking all that jibber jabber. Um, was hearing those personal experiences because I didn't know it was as widespread a thing. So I think it's cathartic for the individuals getting those stories off their chest, and I think it's good for people outside of that experience to understand that those things are more widespread than they necessarily understood. And I think having Trump as the juxtaposition to the first major party female candidate couldn't have been more well couldn't have been more well struck. I mean, it's a shame that he's also everything else that he is. And well, it's a shame that he's that as well. But I mean, in terms of really juxtaposing those two stories, those two storylines within this election, I think that could be really important in that, like you say, quite painful process. Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not the female candidate who has raised these issues. As you point out, it's the male candidate who is the one that's showing the vast differences and the gaps in where people are and what people think. We hear, you know this all the time, that people know rape is wrong and people know you have to have consent. And then you have people like Donald Trump not understanding, describing grabbing a woman with in the way that he did is sexual assault. That Rush Limbaugh thinks that somehow consent is a liberal conspiracy.
That was the one I was going to raise, yeah, because I briefly considered doing a video, but I got too angry, so I scrapped it. Because there's no point just to start shouting at a fucking camera; it's ridiculous. But yeah, his nonsense about if you don't get consent all the time, they're going to call the rape police. No, they're going to call the fucking police. That's what they're called. Because if one of them doesn't have consent, then the other person is a criminal.
Right.
Simple.
And it's got us talking about consent, which is actually kind of timely, considering that was the point of a recent flare-up in YouTube drama. The whole point about consent and when people are capable of giving consent and what consent looks like and means,
Yeah, well, after this nonsense of an election and the fact that so many have come out and defended his obvious, at the very least, bragging about sexual assault. I mean, in theory, we can say, oh, well, he's innocent until proven guilty. If you've bragged about it and so many people come forward about it, it's not a conspiracy at that point. I think that's a pattern of behaviour. But anyway, the people that have defended that on the basis of what consent is and all this fucking malarkey, I'm not going to accept the nonsense. Well, I mean, I didn't have much truck with it before, but I'm definitely now not going to put up with this shit about it's insulting to men to have consent classes, because clearly a number of them don't understand it.
I would say, in terms of like hashtags, I would say not all men, but yes, all women. I don't think all men have a problem, and I don't think all men are the enemy. But there are individuals who do a lot of damage and make everybody else look bad. And then there are, just as we've discussed, like in our Hangouts, people who don't understand how the law works when it comes to consent, and also things like intoxication and capacity to give consent and these kinds of things. And they're not intuitive, and they aren't covered, in health courses, and they should be. And yes, men, there's a lot of misperceptions about consent, I think, and men, obviously, if they get it wrong, they're looking at legal time and, accusations of rape. So it's important that men understand the law and work to protect themselves, and don't have sex with someone if you think they're too drunk to consent, to protect yourself. Just say no. If she really wants it, she'll want it sober too. It's fine, and also for women to understand the concept of consent. So I think everybody needs to be, have a good understanding of what consent is. But I will also say that because of the way the Sex Act works for straight people, and we haven't even talked about how these issues might work outside of heterosexual interactions, but it's very rare for a woman to be, accused of sexual assault comparatively in terms of the rates. And if people are concerned about being accused of rape, then the best thing that a guy could do is just not not have sex with a woman if she even suspects she's too drunk to consent, as a self-protection act. And I think that should be promoted more often. So.
Yes, no, I fully agree.
Yeah. Get her consent, and then, wear a condom. If you're going to have a hookup. So it's not that hard. Then everybody can have a good time.
Yeah.
All right, we kind of got off the topic of the U.S. election, but
Did we? Oh, well, I think they're allied. Unfortunately, they are
Yeah.
actually connected in a
Yeah,
really
sadly.
nasty way.
Yes. We kind of went down the whole, yes, sexual assault route, and then we ended up in
Well,
consent.
it's difficult to talk about Donald Trump without talking about sexual assault, really, isn't it?
At this point, yeah. You know, in the
Mm.
first part, it was his racism, you know, with the wall and his comments about Mexican immigrants and his assumption that a guy who has a Hispanic last name is from Mexico. Yeah. And so it's kind of moved. You know, there have been the phases of Donald in the last too many months.
True, but they've all been fat Elvis, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's a lovely way to put it.
Well, given last night's location, they've all been Las Vegas fat Elvis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I wonder if, yes, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people going as Trump for Halloween, but I want to go as a clown.
Well, it's the same fucking thing.
Yeah, yes, witches, you know, skeletons and
Yeah,
clowns.
yeah, strange makeup on the face, weird hair on top. It's the same fucking creature, basically.
Is there anything about the debates or the races so far that we haven't discussed that you would like to?
I think we've covered pretty much all that needs to be covered.
At
Really.
this point, yeah, until the next. Hey, I've talked to Will Fox, and we're going to be doing an election night live special where we do a hangout, like from my place, and we're going to talk about the election while we wait for the results to come in. Would you like to appear as a guest?
I would be honoured.
Fabulous. Okay, good. Then we'll be in touch with you about like a time slot so that, you know, because it gets kind of late. But I have a feeling we're probably going to be able to call it after Pennsylvania and Florida. So
Well, and
might be an early night.
the beautiful thing is Pennsylvania's done and Florida's
Yeah.
basically done. So basically, as your speech is going to say, we can basically call it now.
Yeah, yes. Yes. Although for the record, I called it in May. I made a video called "Congratulations, Madam President." So
Yes, you did. Yes, you
I
did.
did. I put my neck out there. I climbed out on the limb, and then nobody so far has grabbed a saw. So
Well, if you'd put money on it, you'd have been paid out already. So
I
I mean,
should have. If I had money, I would have put money on it. That's the problem.
yeah. Well, it's one of the lesser problems of poverty, but it is one of the problems. Yes.
All right. Well, for those of you who are listening to a close, so thanks for joining, Kevin. And a pretty focused discussion on the topics. We didn't do too many cul-de-sac points where we had to come back. So, oh, by the way, go and subscribe to Kevin Logan if you haven't, but you should probably have because he has more subs than me. But if for some weird reason you haven't, go check him out. Especially, I can highly recommend his Descent of Manosphere series, which is a great introduction to the manosphere on YouTube. And all his videos are actually quite good. So thank you for joining me, Kevin.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, guys, I've been Christy. You've been awesome. And I will see you soon. Bye.